Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. Today we are in Watersley, Sittard to record a special episode. I am joined by Geoff Proctor, the director of the EuroCrossAcademy. Geoff, thank you for being here and welcome on the show.
Thank you, Noah. It's been really great to work with you the last couple of weeks. I've learned a ton from just what you're doing, and it's been really fun to have you be a part of ECA October Block.
Before we go and talk about EuroCrossAcademy, what it is, and the general part, first we have a sponsor on today's episode. Today's episode is brought to you by Big Bubble Hats. You all need a good and warm hat to stay warm when you're at the cross in the winter, and Big Bubble Hat provides just that. They have over 50 different hats in all type of colors, so whichever hat you are looking for, there will be one that just fits your needs. Use the code CXSocial15 for 15% discount. Well, now let's go and talk about the Eurocross Academy. Some of you might have already seen a bit of our coverage on Twitter or Instagram of the team, but Geoff, for the people who don't know that, could you explain first a bit of your role, who you are, and then what the Eurocross Academy is?
Yeah, so I have been working on various variations of this project for quite a few years, since 2003. But it's evolved. Now it's a nonprofit academy that trains young aspiring talent through summer preparation camps and then selects the strongest riders to then thrive with European race opportunities. And it's all about long-term commitment, holistic application to student athletes as human beings. And we want to provide a critical bridge between domestic teams and the European landscape. So that's it in a nutshell.
You said you started way back in 2003. How did that start? What was your initial idea behind this to get Americans over to Europe?
I had been in a mentor-mentee USA cycling program in the summer of 2003 under Noël Dioncourt in Isegem in West Flanders. And when I did that summer on the road, I was really trying to orchestrate and engineer a cyclocross component to that. And that's when EuroCross Academy started, the December of 2003, and it's been sort of building ever since, and basically offering opportunities to young riders to come over here and gain European race experience, which is really critical to seeing a rider reach his or her full potential.
Why is it so important for Americans to come over and race in Europe? I mean, there's many UCI races in the States as well. We've seen the USCX series, and they are now even televised. Why is it not the same as racing in Europe?
You know, our American scene is ebbed and flowed over the years, and we've certainly had our share of really great venues and strong riders and excellent competition. But I do come back to the 3 C's. You know, the competition level here, the conditions here, and the courses. Yeah, the courses tend to be, I think, you know, if you look at our the NEMR European Championships from this past weekend, it was another epic version of that NEMR venue, which I've been to since 2012, I think. It's usually a World Cup. But that's just a classic example of how challenging the courses are here. And then the conditions, often quite adverse and quite grim in terms of the weather and just the temperature, and it just adds that much more to what's expected at this level with a rider. And then the competition, learning who these other riders are from these other nations, where you're going to be competing against them in the World Championships and in the World Cups. And so I think it really helps to develop a familiarity with who you're riding against, and things like speed and cadence and gearing, and it's an excellent forum for learning that.
You've been doing this for a long time. Who are some of the riders that you've brought to Europe and worked with before?
Back in 2003, we had 2 women, Gina Hall and Carmen Richardson DeLucio, getting top 10s in World Cups. That was right around our 2002 Worlds, where we had the strongest women's team in the world in Zolder 2002 Worlds. And then over the years, you know, lots of really strong riders have come through, a Gage Hecht or a Danny Summerhill or a Bjorn Sealander. More recently, you know, now finally with the women's junior category, which I've advocated for years, just having that gives us that much more opportunity to bring over our junior women. And so, yeah, just the sky's the limit in terms of, I think we have a lot of really budding talent and a great development sort of system evolving in the U.S. to where we can keep becoming like a strong world force in this small world of cyclocross.
You start with preparing the juniors you bring over in the summer by doing summer training camps. By now there's 2, Montana and Vermont. Could you tell us what these camps look like, how many riders show up there, and what you do there?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, they're helping young riders develop the mindset of disciplined training. So we have 3 actual physical sessions a day with off-the-bike early morning training, strength training and conditioning, followed by a mid to late morning cyclocross skills training, and then an afternoon endurance session on the back roads of Vermont or Montana, usually on a lot of gravel. We have fun with QOM and KOM, and then in the evening sessions, more sort of classroom educational opportunities to discuss. Coaches will take a certain topic. As a classroom teacher myself for a long time, I really think it's helpful to broach certain concepts in the classroom before you expect to see that in the athlete in the field. And so it's helpful to sort of gradually familiarize them, cultivate them, nurture that, what they're going to see and what to expect, to then have them be that much more prepared when they're actually in the field, in training, or here in Europe. And so it's very much a progression, starting with the summer camps. So I like to work with a rider in the summer and get to know them before they come over here. It's all about that whole athlete concept. And so it's character training as well, talking about integrity or discipline or whatever, academic promise or coachability or all kinds of character components that sort of you can bring to the fore and articulate and actually make them tangible, instead of sort of just saying, oh yeah, I need to have those qualities to be a successful athlete. Actually formalizing it and articulating it. And so that's part of the summer camp. It's a week-long camp, roughly 30 riders, 6 coaches, and it's been wonderful to bring on coaches as mentors as well that have come through ECA, and it's a really fulfilling pathway for me.
And then you mentioned that after these summer camps, it's a way for you to already monitor how the riders are doing. You told me that you then go to a couple of races, take a look on how they're doing, and then eventually you make a decision, I'm going to bring these and these juniors to Europe. Prior to this year, we'll come to talk about this year in a bit, how did that go? How did you select these riders? When did you make the decisions? And then once you came to Europe, what did you do, and how did it work with the World Cup teams?
At the core is this idea of creating opportunities. A lot of cycling is obviously individual merit, but I've seen over the years just the importance of really creating opportunities for these young riders to learn the ropes. And so after the summer camps, then I try to get to a few races domestically and visit with the riders, and then gradually around some early November, I start to look at who might benefit the most, who's ready to come over, and then select the team by mid-November. And then our nationals have moved around. They've been in now where they are now in early December, and they've been in January. And that was always interesting to have camp before nationals. But anyway, select as many riders as I can accommodate based on staffing, and then bring them over. And it's usually during the curse period, the Christmas period, where there tends to be a couple of weeks of quite a few race opportunities. And we go through and we tackle usually 1 or 2 World Cups if we have positions, and then the other big Belgian series races or Dutch races.
In all those years that you've been coming, what's the thing that most riders learn? What's the thing they book most progression in when they are here with you?
They grow tremendously as people, because there's a lot of non-racing, non-competition moments at a European camp. So you're learning how to get along, you're learning how to do chores, you're learning how to contribute to the effort. It's really important when you're together for a couple of weeks that everybody is congenial and affable, and nobody's really getting on anybody's nerves, because you're here to compete, and you want to have the most conducive atmosphere. So learning those sorts of people skills and practical intelligence skills is what I want them to learn and contribute to. And then in terms of their riding, obviously gaining experience and gaining faculty with their skills. So, we'll talk about in a minute, that it's training sessions, but in the past, when we've been in Vorsalar, we try to get over to the Lichtart forest and train in that wonderful sort of natural lab for cyclocross. It's sort of one of the epicenters of cyclocross training during the week, and so it's just the perfect environment to help these kids learn some of the skills.
Do you think that it's very important for riders to get out and train in group sessions, for instance, on a location like where you go to the Sven Hill and try and tackle that?
That's become a little bit of a sort of a staple of all the summer camps, is the quote-unquote Sven Hill, but it's just taking that skill and isolating that skill. How many times in a race do you have a barely rideable hill, or a hill that you can power up? I mean, if we look at the Europeans in Namur this year, there's a climb that Thibaut Nace was able to ride yesterday, and that's a direct application of the Sven Hill training. And being able to not get off and power up that is where you can gain 1, 2, 3, 4 seconds, and that's kind of what it's about. So yes, definitely training the skills, but you can't necessarily learn that all in 2 weeks. It takes over time, but if you can plant the seeds, then they go home, they find a Sven Hill, and oftentimes after the summer camp, the kids go home and they try to find these sort of specific skills and practice them, whether it's a hingeable barrier dismount where they learn how to bunny hop, or whether it's a particular cornering course, or a start practice drill. Any of these skills, if they can go home, share the knowledge with their local group, and practice, I feel like we're just like spreading out the knowledge and spreading out the opportunities to excel.
Do you think that these lack of group session trainings, because the United States is such a huge country and there's few clusters of riders? I mean, there are a few which you told me about, but it's a lot different than in Belgium. In Belgium, all the teams have a training session on Wednesday, even already in the juniors category, sometimes already within Nieuwelingen. Is that something that you think plays a role in the level of American juniors? The Belgians are usually quite critical about the American level, and every year after the United States World Cups, they're like, oh, well, we need an American superstar, and there hasn't been one. And yeah, well, they had Compton, and then there was like still a reason to go, but now Compton stopped, and the days of Page and Power, they are also gone. So what's the point? Where are they coming from? Whereas they tend to forget that Belgium is such a small country with such a high concentration of cycling clubs and group sessions where everybody shows up, and the juniors sometimes even get to train already with the pros, and they can really improve themselves. And do you think that maybe a lack of that is something that's overlooked in the Belgian media, that they're expecting too much for the way that the United States is in terms of distance and cycling popularity?
I mean, to a certain extent, but I think that we're making progress. I mean, the number of young riders that I've had at summer camp over the years will send videos of they go home and they build this course around their backyard. So, okay, they don't have a group training, but they literally they build a course in their backyard. I don't see that happening too often here. There tend to be more group trainings here with their club or whatever. But so that's one way that the isolation or the distance in America can be sort of reduced that way. But also a lot of these teams, in America are doing weekly trainings, and and more power to them. That I tip my hat to those programs for really working with the young riders. So I think that these are not insurmountable things, and we're always going to do it a little differently than here, which is great, and we can always be creative. And then I think at a certain point in a rider's career, then you're coming over here, and if actually you reach sort of the upper echelons of the sport, and you're if you take, for instance, Clara Hunsinger, now she's on a team, she's based here, she's doing those weekly trainings. Like that's sort of the progression, and that's the hope that ECA can be a bridge from what we were talking about and then to where we might be going in terms of a career.
And what about the racing schedule then? In Europe, juniors race every week, sometimes twice a weekend. In the States, riders are unable to race every weekend. Well, it is possible because most of the time there's racing every week or every other week, but it requires a lot of travel. It's expensive. You can't expect juniors to be paying for that travel every time. It costs time. They have school. Is that something that also makes it a bit harder for an American junior compared to a Belgian one that can just get in his car and drive to a race every weekend and be there within 1 or maximum 1.5 hours?
The burden of travel in the U.S., or the tyranny of distance, to quote from a novel that I read way back when, is very real. But at the same time, I really advocate in the summer camps, if we can, as leaders in the sport, agree on a common UCI schedule for juniors of maybe a specific set of races, and then I'm a big advocate of having young riders learn to race their local regional races in between those big weekends, and also even learn how to take weekends off to train, and have a fellow running coach talks about chunking the stress and chunking the rest. And so putting in chunks the stress, when is your race period, when are your big targets, but also chunking the rest, as in recovering and training and getting sort of the rest block, training block, race block combination down. So I think there are definitely ways we can do it. And I think that that's a way we can sort of, in some way, overcome the great distances. Because, yes, it's getting on a plane to go to races every weekend is a massive undertaking, and I think it's very careful. You need to meter out your efforts during the season as a young rider, especially if you have aspirations to come over to Europe and or make the World Championship team or whatever. It's a long season from now our front-loaded races in September to all the way to the World Championships at the end of January.
Let's go and talk about this block of racing then. This October you got over here with a group of juniors to race the 2 World Cups in Tabor and Maasmechelen, and then conclude with the Koppenberg Cross. Could you tell us a bit about why you're able to host a racing block in Europe now for the first time in October, and how you are able to sort that out with the World Cups in collaboration with USA Cycling?
Yeah, so I've been envisioning this type of a block for quite a long time, and I have done World Cup blocks with USA Cycling it's around our Thanksgiving time, and have come over here during my Christmas vacation time. I've just retired from being a classroom English teacher for a long time, my whole professional career, and so I've been envisioning the opportunity to come over during an October block, for instance, and really with both hands, really grab onto what this is and what it can be. And so started working on this block, sometime this summer in collaboration with USA Cycling, and they've been wonderful to support us with vehicles, housing, infrastructure. And so it's become sort of a team effort to come over here. And then when this particular block, we undertook the 2 World Cups and Koppenberg, so 3 races. But it's the opportunity to work with riders both physically, with their training, with their skill work, and their competition work, but also we're able to do course briefings before the World Cups, individual meetings where we'll talk for an hour to 2 hours with the rider about everything about their riding, everything about where they are in school, everything with their goals, where they want to take their cycling. So it's just a really important and valuable time to work, and having that focus, singular focus of being here has I think, yeah, it's really helped the riders. It's helped me. I certainly learn a ton every time I come.
The blog started off with the World Cup in Tabor, and it's certainly nice to hear that you enjoyed and that there were things learned again. And the trip to Tabor is one that you've made before, already for the World Championships, but now for the World Cup. How was it for the riders to adapt to racing in Europe and just in general? It's a big transition. You fly over half of the world and then you come in a totally different culture, and it's completely new here. Everything is different, and there were times that I saw the riders being a bit flabbergasted when they were like getting out at a gas station alongside the road and seeing the things that you could buy there. And it's also the jet lag. How was it for the riders to adapt to that? And in general, is that something you see every year, a bit of a culture shock?
Yeah, to a certain extent. Certainly. It's a new environment. Everything's new. The food's new. The travel's new. Starting off our first race of this block with a 10-hour drive to Tabor, that's, plus they've just traveled from the U.S., so that's 2 big travel days. So I think that first weekend, it really did take a bit for us to get our feet, even though everything went really smoothly and the hotel was great and training was great, organization was really good. I think that it's still just the newness of everything is not to be underestimated. For instance, the Dutch, I know that they drove on Friday from the Netherlands, just like we did. But again, we've just had 2 days before that, a big flight across. So, yeah, it's actually, I find most athletes, myself, we're able to adjust to the time difference here if you do all the right things on the first day. It's actually harder to go back the other way, I feel. But anyway, I think there's a lot of research still to be done and lots of things to be learned about jet lag. But after a week, you could see that everybody was hitting their stride once we found our rhythm here and got on the right schedule, or what we felt was the best schedule, and then the training on the Wednesday, and then by the second weekend, I think everybody was feeling better, and then the third race was shortly thereafter. I think it's these strategic blocks, you have to absolutely be cognizant of their schoolwork, so building in school study time, because if we're here for 2.5 weeks, but that's a kind of around the maximum in terms of their missing school, so you really have to balance everything.
You mentioned the training session. You went to train in Alphen, and Gerben de Knecht, the Dutch national coach, was giving that training. That was, for me, maybe the most fun and interesting thing I followed you doing in this trip. It was lovely to see that these riders were learning so quickly, because Gerben learned them a bit more of the European style racing. He set out a couple of 180-degree TV corners. He had them practice starts in the sand. He had them ride through the sand, and most riders had never ridden through the European type of sand, which is really different to the American type of sand, from what I heard, where it continues to fall together. It's really different than the dune sand we have in Koksijde or in Zonhoven. It was super lovely to see the riders develop so quickly and improve significantly within a training session of 2 hours. And that's really the development, and I like to see it. And is that development really what motivates you to keep on putting in all the effort and all the resources and money to keep on coming over with juniors year in, year out?
Yes, I mean, I think I would agree. That was like a really good sort of snapshot of what I'm hoping will happen on these blocks. First, I've known Gerben for many years, and he's just been a wonderful colleague. Like, I love the camaraderie of the coaches and the sort of the folks here, coaches and directors, in terms of their willingness to share and help. And Gerben is sort of one of those individuals that's been, collegiality with him is fantastic. So we went up there, and exactly, you have those skills that you're working on, and he was able to see things that I didn't see, or he had a different way of explaining to the riders some little tips, and just one little morsel of wisdom can go a really long way with a rider. So whether it's cornering or sand technique or running things we worked on. It's just really beneficial to the riders, and to hear it from somebody else, not me or Roger, my fellow coach here with ECA. And so that was wonderful. And then to just, as you're riding up and down and in and out of this kind of like this big like hole in the forest, to hear Gavin say, "Oh yeah, well this is a crater formed by a bomb in World War II," or whatever, like that immediately makes an impact on a young American rider. Like, whoa, like there's some serious history here too. And so that just contributes to the whole experience. And it was a little bit of a drive, but I knew that it would be a good opportunity for our riders to get that. And I want to do it. I hope to do it again, and we've done the same thing in Lichtart during the Christmas period.
Everything that you do is about development and progression. And throughout the trip, you already mentioned it briefly, there was a line of national progression as well. It was a rough start in Tabor after big travel days, and the riders gave it their everything, but most of them weren't too satisfied with their result. But the week after in Maasmechelen, there was already a significant improvement in terms of results, but also in feeling. And then it really concluded with the mythical Koppenberg Cross, where AJ August took the win in the junior men's category. Magnus and David both got into the top 10. Ben was just outside of the top 10. Elias got in his best result of the block. On the women's side, Elsa was able to finish on the lead lap because they were racing against the elites. Everybody really seemed to settle and get these good results. How was the Koppenberg day for you, winning the men's junior race, or having one of your poulains winning the men's junior race? How was that for you?
I think as a development coach, you want your most important skill in your toolbox is patience. It's all about patience and seeing the big picture and helping a young rider who wants more instant gratification to see the big picture. That's probably the hardest thing, is the patience part of it. But also to have a day or a series of days on this block where you do get the results. It's just such it's really nice reinforcement for what sort of your ethos is and what you believe and what you're trying to do. And so I think I'm pretty sure I was with Logan Owen and Gage Hecht when they won, but AJ became the third or fourth rider to win a Belgian race, a Belgian men's junior race. And then Vita, in the youngness of the women's junior category in the World Cup, but still having her results was wonderful. And all the riders, just seeing them progress, if they all had races that they can be proud of and things to take home and keep working on. And again, this was just a little snapshot at 2 weeks of their life. And if you ascribe to the idea of, I've been thinking a lot about this 10,000 days 10,000 days concept to reach your full athletic potential. That's essentially 30 years and from the time you can walk. And so if you just look at this block in that context, then you see, wow, this is a truly big picture, and it's all about creating the opportunities to then progress at the right times in the right places.
So it's all about the progression and long-term development. Do you think that on the long term, an American athlete has more growth potential in cyclocross when they come here as a junior for the first time compared to Belgian and Dutch riders?
I think athletes are athletes, and I think that sort of maybe physically we're all fairly equal. But the concept of creating opportunities to open new doors, I think, is where I want to focus the next several years, because our riders are, again, I think they're absolutely of equal strength, but they just need to have more time to develop. They need the right opportunities to develop, and so they're getting some of those in the U.S. And if they can come over here and learn on a block, we can sort of catch up to what a Belgian has on the offer for every single weekend. So I just think that we absolutely have the talent, and we have the potential. We just need lots of opportunities to cultivate that.
Yeah, that's the thing. I am a strong believer that the Belgians benefit from having centralized the sport in Belgium. It's so mainstream after they pulled the Super Prestige all the way to Belgium. The World Cup has lost a lot of races in other countries. If you look back at the 2000s in the early years, the Super Prestige would go to Czech Republic, they would go to Switzerland, they would go to Italy. But with this nice generation and Wellens and de Klerk and Vervecke, they had a bunch of very strong riders, and they utilized that momentum of dominating the sport to draw the races to Belgium for financial reasons. In Belgium, there's big companies sponsoring the cross. In other countries, it's a scrap for money, and it's just a question, does ECA find a sponsor that's able to help them come over? Does this Czech team find a sponsor that helps their juniors come over? Does the Slovak National Federation get the money to bring over talented riders like Gladonova and Schwarzenberger? Both got a top 10 at the European Championships this weekend. It's more of a scramble for money there, whereas the Belgians, they can fund Nieuwelinge teams, and their U17s can race high-level races. They can already get a touch of the Koppenberg. They can get a taste of the Kuil and Zonhoven. Every week they can race these high-profile races. They can race against the best riders because the best riders come to their country, Belgium. If the best riders aren't there, there's a huge pool of Belgian and Dutch riders racing there, which all have a super high level. I already mentioned it, they can ride these training sessions, which just makes me think, well, I don't think they necessarily have a higher ceiling in athletic performance than the Americans or Czech or French, whatever. But on their ladder to that ceiling, they are a few steps ahead, and their ladder is smooth. The American ladder might be missing a couple of steps, which you need to make a huge step to get to the next step, but these European ladders are just super smooth for the Belgians to continue and dominate the sport.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. We're still in sort of the absolute building phase of creating more rungs on the ladder. You know, we have some rungs on the ladder, but we don't have as many as the Benelux area. And again, you know, we don't need to just talk about Belgium. I mean, if you look at France or, you know, Switzerland doesn't have a national series, but they still have a system, a development system, and it's great to see. But yeah, France has 160 juniors in a race. So we don't have to just talk about Belgium, but also, you know, that comes at a price as well. Like if there's too much pressure on these Belgian kids, you know, that's another thing that we don't necessarily have. So it can work both ways. But I think to overview this, it's important to create those rungs on a ladder, and ECA is just one of those. We have great development programs going on in the U.S. We have these stepping stones, and USA Cycling has the goal of the national team, and we have a lot of these pieces, but we just need to fill in some of the other levels and keep all, you know, working towards the same cause and sharing with each other how best to get there. I certainly had incredible mentors when I've been sort of intrigued by cyclocross since the mid 80s, and I had some super mentors back in the day that helped me get going, and then into the 90s. And then I think I always wanted to, I wasn't necessarily a professional rider. So while I did race some world championships, it was much more for me about how can I help this project, how can I help our American cyclocross riders and cycling in general, because a lot of riders that I've worked with have gone on to other disciplines. And so it's just the belief that we can compete with the right and efficient use of resources. We can be as good as any country in the world.
Yeah, of course, some riders that you've mentored are now on the road, and that goes in general, and that's maybe adding to what you said about the pressure. Yes, the Belgian riders might feel pressure, but the appeal to go to the road in Belgium is much smaller than in other countries. In Belgium, because cross is so mainstream, you can earn a really good salary if you become a really good cross rider. In other countries, you need to be like the best cross rider to even make it affordable for you to come over to race in Europe. Look at Spain. We have Orts and Suarez Fernandez. These are the two best riders, and they are able to come over here. Orts is on a road team, which makes it affordable for him, but Burgos BH is super supportive of his cross campaign. Suarez Fernandez is on a cross team, and they are able to get over a handful of riders. But it's a lot more complicated because the appeal to the road, where there's more money. If you have a semi-decent road career, you can earn more money than if you have a okay cross career where you can get in top 10 of World Cups, because it just doesn't pay enough. The prize money in cross is super low. It won't compensate if you need to travel to the World Cups in Belgium or Czech Republic, so you're reliant on sponsors. And for sponsors, there's just super niche market. If most of the races are in Belgium, you need to be a Spanish company with interest in Belgium for it really to pay off. And to find a company that, first of all, is Spanish and has a big interest in Belgium, and then second of all, is also interested in cross to appeal to people, super hard to find that.
A good analogy to with this age group of juniors is in other sports in America, say soccer or football or basketball, when these riders that we are 17, 18, they're still in high school, they're sort of in other sports, say soccer, they're the best player in their state. And then they go to a college and start playing soccer in university level, and all of a sudden they're surrounded by the best players from each state on their team. And so you really see the levels of the game in other sports, and that's what it's like for riders to come here. And all of a sudden you're just thrown in with a lot of strong athletes, and it's hard to sort of analogize, but if you were to take a group of aspiring young Belgian baseball players, or let's say basketball, you have European basketball, but you also in America have the NBA. And so it's sort of like that process in reverse. And so I think we need to be patient, because cycling is very much a European sport. So if we want to achieve sort of acclaim and success and careers, it's mostly going to happen here. I'm not going to say that it's not still, it has happened in the U.S., but road right now has been a bit dormant. And we have gravel, we have mountain biking. It's hard to say which is the most thriving discipline in America, but for me, I think it's important. Number one, that these young athletes are becoming strong individuals and human beings. Number two, I don't necessarily care what discipline they end up being successful in. Obviously, I would love to see it in cyclocross, but I just want to help them on their way as a bridge.
Well, you're doing a good job by creating all these opportunities. I think we've covered most of it. Maybe to finalize as final question, will you be back this Christmas with another block?
We've been coming, ECA has been coming for the Christmas block for almost 20 years. And that's, always works best with their school for vacation and frequency of racing. So we'll be back and working on that selection here as the U.S. season winds down towards nationals. And then, the aim is to bring, 10 to 12 athletes over and help them with this next step in their development. If they're ready and hungry and motivated, that's what the athlete that ECA wants to help.
Well, we'll see you around then. Thanks so much for your time. It was certainly interesting to hear about all you've done for the American Cross. Thanks again.
Thank you, Noah. And I just want to shout out again to USA Cycling for their help, and also for some of our sponsors, and just all the staff that has been involved to help make this happen. Both ECA staff, USA Cycling staff, Belgian staff, Dutch staff, and all the athletes and families. And I want to keep building this and creating chances for our athletes to shine. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for your time. That will conclude this episode of the Cyclocross Social podcast. We will be back with another episode, and that will be released on Saturday because there is racing on Friday this week. The Super Prestige in Niel second round, which takes place on Friday the 11th of the 11th, which marks the end of the First World War, which is a national day off in Belgium, so a perfect excuse for a cyclocross race. We will see you guys then for a debrief of that race. Hope you guys all enjoyed. Leave us a comment on YouTube or send us an email. The email address is in the description.